podcast 11, I spoke with Andreas Nicholas. He's an artist, a filmmaker, a film editor, a meme maker, and he's worked in both the entertainment and podcast industry. Without further ado, for those who choose to stick around, as always, I hope that you can enjoy this talk. If you want to know what the topics are in this video, then you can look in the description box below. The podcast will now begin.
Oh, there we go.
Hey there.
Sorry about that. How's it going?
Good. The first thing I want to talk about with you is like when I look at your YouTube, it's like you are incredibly prolific as like an artist.
Thank
I've
you.
met a lot of different yeah. And I'm impressed. I'm impressed. I feel like I don't know anyone who's more prolific than you personally. I don't know anyone that's producing more content than you. So I've met a lot of other people along my journey of life. And it seems like some people, they hesitate to even start producing content. And
Totally.
years
That's
later,
everyone's biggest problem.
yeah. And years later, it seems like sometimes that's the same story for some people. And so why do you think you have so much fluidity, and like what do you feel like makes you not stuck as an artist and keeps you producing so much content?
Dang. I mean, like the first obvious answer is we're all gonna die, you know? So if you don't start making art now, then
Yeah.
you
Like
have
when are you
less
gonna do it?
time. Every time you don't make art, you have less time to make art. So or any change, any action to the world. So I mean, and that can be great too, right? Like there's time that you're supposed to spend reflecting, and you'll find living simply. You don't always interact. You don't always destroy people's their choices, their life. There's time for that, but it's really important to make. And I think punk rock is the other thing. Punk rock, you just do it, just go, because like the thing is, a show has to happen. And you see right now, I have friends like Tim Pool, my buddy, is making a song that's #2 on iTunes.
Wow.
It's like
Doesn't know.
totally ridiculous because he's
Yeah.
just like a podcaster. I mean, he's a great musician too, but it's I mean, his song is beating Evanescence because there's nobody else who's making music right now,
Mhm.
because they're just trying to wait to make. And this is something I talked to your brother about years ago too. Just put out stuff because it'll be there, and you can always just, what do you call your album? Call it this month in this year, and then just do the next one and call the song Today, whatever. You could literally just name it like August.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's
Whatever.
okay. And
Yeah.
and later on you can say, wow. I mean, I have friends who listen to their recordings of themselves and say, man. And I had friends telling me this too, like Ian Crossland was a buddy of mine in Santa Monica in like 2010, and he was starting to record himself, and he was like looking at this timeline that you can't see of yourself, because you can see in a mirror your face, which is already incredible, not a natural thing to do. But with podcasts, he could watch his vlogs for months and years, and how he changed. And I don't agree with anything I said 10 years ago, you
Yeah.
know, and that's awesome. You can grow from self-reflection. So there's that too. And then I also worked for CNN for a while. And when I did, my boss was this
Wow.
guy, Bert DeBrow. And Bert DeBrow had kind of produced he actually produced the Jerry Springer show and designed the Jerry Springer show. And so
Wow.
for him, it was like, it doesn't matter if people like it or hate it. It does, but it matters that they like it or hate it. It's all about reaction. It's getting people to care about content, right? So try to focus on that. And then they can comment, and then they can argue, or they can discourse in whatever way that leads to rhetoric that is bigger, and that's a huge thing because it's participatory, so that's why I do the kind of content I do with my Exertus channel, and interviews and everything. And yeah, I just think if you do stuff every day, you're commenting on stuff right away. That's a huge magical thing. If you comment on something right away, then it still matters. And I love making movies. That was my big thing. Your brother and I made a movie at one point, which like never got released because some of the
Yeah.
people involved, and I don't know exactly even where half of the files are. Miles Maltby, by the way, if you watch this, I love you. Please help me find the files. I would love to get that out. But it's just another thing where if you put it out right away, something happens. And I have these great, grandiose ideas for timeless classic films, like a lot of people do. And I have this idea for how I'd put a multi-track 24 channel music file together. But sometimes it's better to just record, live. It's a good thing. So that's been a big focus of mine, is just doing a lot of live content recently. But even before that, I would do, YouTube videos all the time using whatever recording software I could. And I don't know. That's all I got. I think you just have to do it.
Well,
Even
with,
if you
with
hate it, that's it. Do it even if you hate it. Even if you
yeah,
don't like your content, put it out
how do you
out of
navigate
respect.
your own fears about like going on live? Because like when you're going live, you can't go back and really edit it. You can delete it out, but like to some degree or another, you're putting out content that I don't know, like how do you navigate those fears within inside of your own mind? What's
I
your
mean, so
approach?
there's like this idea, I think, of the self that's really
Hmm.
hard. That's, I think, the biggest problem, because we're always, there's this real shame that's been taught to our idiom. And there's so many idioms that control us anyway, right? We're not controlled by egos, we're controlled by idioms. You look at the David Bowie idiom or something, or you look at the American idiom, or whatever it means to be the Soviet man, or a good citizen, or a Silicon kid, or a teenager in America. Like this idea that like the self is driven, but really there's like different compartments. There's this driven human animalistic force, and then there's this shadowy kind of what is like trying to project to the world, and then there's what you believe people want to see. There's like what you think the world wants. And we have a hard time, because we're saying, oh, maybe the world's not going to like this part of myself,
Yeah,
and that's a big reason you'll hide it. But it's not just that. It's that, like I said earlier, maybe you won't like a part of yourself, maybe not now, but maybe next year. Maybe
yeah,
you'll disagree with yourself. And I think that it's a big humility to just say, hey, I mean, clearly there's great things about yourself and me and whomever is the character in this. Like anybody who's trying, like there's something great about someone who's trying.
yeah.
But if they're willing to be a human, and have some humility about that, then they can make it more about the learning process. And I think that's more important anyway. Coming at it with this intellectualism, like I know everything because I went to college and I read all these books on philosophy, and let me tell you all about Fromm and whatever, like Kierkegaard. Like that's awesome when they're already into it. But if they're not, then it's like the Norm Macdonald approach of just like, I don't know what's going on, I just like to listen to other people talk. Like that's the strength.
Okay, so you've talked to a lot of people both on your podcast and by the looks of it on your journey through life. How is all of that interacting with so many different types of personalities and characters changed you as a person? And what's the importance of getting out into the world, whether it's the real world or the cyber world, and interacting with other minds?
Man,
Um,
well, okay, so it sucks, because one of the sad things about that is, and since you bring it up, and I've been trying not to think about it, but like the last couple days, especially today, all day I was thinking about how I used to be more I was at NASA, I was focusing on engineering and all this other stuff that was more, the people involved were more humble and more disciplined. And even in philosophy, kids that
mhm,
are really quiet and focused. But then I've also got this other side of me that's a bit more Aquarian and interested in like media, and media's got narcissism vibes.
mhm,
And so there's a lot of really great people. I'm really lucky, because there's some friends of mine like Adam Krigler, like super humble, but there's a lot of other people in media that are just, that you're surrounded in when you're on Twitter, for instance, people that are only about trying to fill up their numbers or something like that. And that could be like not a good thing, right? And it sucks if it becomes like an important thing where you're like, oh no, I need people to have seen a number of my videos for me to want to make another video every day or something like that. That's a bummer. That can really affect you, and it shouldn't have to, because because you have to understand, how many videos, like when I watch videos on YouTube, a lot of the time I'm watching videos from 30 years ago or something that are recorded. It's from a TV,
Yeah.
CCTV that nobody, no, or community access television that nobody else saw anyway, or maybe a few people did anyway. There's a time and a place where media gets to the right person. I think that's another
Yeah,
thing.
I agree. There's a lot of like really interesting little videos that have like literally like 180 views, 40 views, whatever, like 18 views, even if it's like, yeah, like very
Totally.
small amount of views. And I'm like, this is interesting. That was worth my time. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
there's so
and
much content. Yeah.
I feel like there's like, it's an inevitable thing to like acknowledge that the algorithm feeds on certain kinds of human engagement that isn't necessarily educational or prone to profundity. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it used to. You look at the algorithm up until February of 2019, I think it was like pretty good. And then they
Okay.
started saying, oh, we have to start cutting back on things that are associated with a crackpot. You know what I mean? And so anything that was kind of considered conspiratorial, but that was so convoluted of a concept that it led to so many things being, and so many philosophical conversations being suppressed in exchange for people really promoting travel couple videos and cooking videos and things like that. So there's been a pushback. And so
Hmm.
right now I've been noticing a lot of people are able to put out their content, and the main thing is you make community. Community is huge. Community was the thing that really made YouTube possible in the first place. You could respond to other people's videos, and they've taken that feature away in a sense, but now you've got discords, you've got communities around yourself, and that's a huge push, because now you can talk to other, I do streams with other podcasters every week, like Based AF, we do on Adam Krigler channel. I mean, that's got 5 guys like Quarter Garrett from Steven Crowder, and Flodzilla, and George the Giant Slayer, who has his own channel. And so all these different groups of people that are making stuff, Darth Call, right? They have their own communities, and then when we bring them together, that really helps because everyone has their own focus, and you know
Yeah, and then your communities are like intertangling and you have like a larger community going on within the smaller communities, like the micro and macrocosms of communities.
Totally. I mean, you've got like small groups essentially, or focus groups, or something like that, even in between the groups that are together. And it's interesting because there's also these organic things, which I'm just starting to get into more and more. But like Garrett, he's going to these podcast meetups and things, which are kind of like Comic Cons. And it's interesting because, you're like, wait a second. Oh, yeah, people watch me. But, at the same time, they're really interested in the content that you're trying to investigate, because like for me, I'm not really doing like comic book research or something, which is awesome for people that are, and I have friends who do. I love all that stuff, but I do like
Hmm.
history and philosophy and stuff like that. So for me, it's especially interesting when somebody's interested in talking about these things, because they'll be like, oh, did you see this book, and everything. And so it's really a great way to build up organic human interaction too, which I was surprised by with YouTube. I figured it was digital, but no, like I'm meeting people. Like I went to Spain, we had like a whole interaction with a number of people that were excited about the channel. When I landed in Bermuda, there
Hmm.
was a guy who just, I got off the plane, I took a like live video of myself, and he's like, I'm in Bermuda, I love your channel. And he picked us up and he took us all around Bermuda.
Wow.
So there's a lot of power to, interacting with people.
Incredible. Thank you for sharing all of that information with us. Um, so it seems like in some of the videos of yours that you've created that I've watched, you hone in on symbols, kind of underlying meanings behind them. And there's one time also that um, you were touching on one thing, and I don't know if you used the word omen or not, but like in your experience, symbols and omens, even if you want to touch on like things like synchronicity and intuition, like how have these things been a part of your journey? Are they a part of your journey or are they not? And yeah.
So I believe in consciousness and symmetry. You know, I know
Mhm.
you've got this like this song that you wrote that gets stuck in my head all the time. I don't even believe in a creator. I can't sing for the life of me, by the way.
That
But like
sounds
I don't believe in a creator. I don't
Yeah.
believe in an all-powerful God. I just believe in kindness
Yeah.
because it's been a minute since I've heard your SoundCloud, but I
Yeah.
love that song. It's one of my favorite songs. Um, I think that that relates a lot to my idea of synchronicity. And so you think of the, you know, Spinoza, right? And all of these philosophers. So there's one philosopher that really, for me, it's Teilhard Chardin. Teilhard Chardin was this Jesuit priest and he believed in God and everything else. But really, it was because he was into science and he was into like rocks. And he's like, dude, stardust and sand becoming jade? That's crazy. And like, how could atoms socialize? And it must be this, you know, a mega point of physics, and you know that must explain what they mean when they say God. I get it, I get it, I get it. And also, okay, so evolution. When you say worship, you mean evolution. Oh, okay, I get it. And it's amazing. One of the best, you know, Julian Huxley was really into Teilhard Chardin, and then the Catholic Church was like, shh, 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 quiet, don't do this. You know, you can't make this metaphysical trip of synchronicity, of socialization, of atoms, of symmetry. Go to China and just be quiet. And then he discovers the Peking man, which is like an evolutionary link, exactly proving his point. So to me, there's this thing there, you know, and Spinoza, you know, he's in a time when they're saying, hey, you can be an atheist, but really it's Islam saying that it's not the single parent who writes books, that God is this it's this synchronicity, it's this like connection, it's el ella in Spanish for he, she, it's the love, it's like this whole other thing. It's not just a personification and anthropomorphic. But because of that, you've got all these people today that are starting to, okay, well, God's not real, but what about clockwork elves? You know what I mean? I do my DMT and I talk into there's got to be something there, you know? That's a thing, you know? I mean, clearly
it
there's
is.
something
It's
more.
definitely something. It's like some collective manifestation of something. I don't know what's going on there. How to yeah.
So like I did a lot of research into this and that, and like so John C. Lilly, so Epstein, right? He buys this house on top of Virgin Islands that used to belong to John C. Lilly, who first engineered LSD for the CIA, and he was doing tests on dolphins where they're giving them DMT and LSD and all these research chemicals from the military in order to get dolphins to echolocation in the dream realm, right? And it all comes back to this idea that there's like solid state intelligence and Earth coincidence control office, which is echo. So maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I don't know. But this idea that there's synchronicity into the world, everywhere I go, I'm seeing synchronicity. And I'm believing that there's something beyond the veil that might be represented by consciousness. And you see storms, they call them Hurricane Katrina or whatever. There might be something to this idea, like the way the Veda describes consciousness and the way, you know, chi is described in flow. There might be more to consciousness than just the physical manifestation. I think we're seeing that with AI, you know, and this idea that as technology's evolving, it's a substrate independent thing that can hold consciousness. So I think synchronicity is everywhere around us. And for me, yeah, luck, synchronicity, winning the lottery, empathy, they're connected concepts to me. Like the idea that you're being aware of something else being touched is a big part of you know, because like that's the only thing that you can feel, because electrostatics don't allow you to feel anything, and your eyes are touched because of photons, your ears are drums, right? So everything is touch, but you can only feel empathy. So the irony there, you know, I don't know, I think synchronicity is that, and I believe that we're, as long as we're aware of each other, we can fold into some sort of a bigger picture than is just ourselves, right? Which is really hard. If you're narcissistic, you're egomaniacal, all this stuff, that makes it way worse. But it's beautiful because if you do it, you're like, oh, I fit in God, whatever that is, you know, universe.
Interesting. So, am I correct in my like interpretation when it sounds like what you're saying is like kind of that thing that people call intuition or our ability to empathize and have feelings for other people's suffering, um, and the timing of things, all these different types of synchronicities that arise for different people's experiences in life, all of that is kind of somehow potentially connected to consciousness and something beyond the veil, what we can't necessarily see physically, but maybe has to do with something else that we don't. I don't know. A
Yeah,
lot of people have.
transcendental. I think exactly that's exactly what I think. I think that transcendentally that there's something like energy becomes matter, becomes energy again through this process, right? And as it's happening, we feel these really lucky, good things that seems beneficial in the long in a more long run sense. Even it's not just even instantaneous satisfaction of happiness. It's like a continual amount of this is prosperity. This is opening up opportunities for the greater. I think that that's a big part of synchronicity, but also it's just this weird amount of luck because you're like, wow, I survived. My family survived. I knew not to get on that plane, or
Yeah.
I knew to choose to do the right thing that led to this benefit. I made the right decision or something like that for my family. All those things I think are connected to the idea of knowing what is best for not just you, but for more than you. And the more aware you are of how the greater good, the more you can make your choice, not just your choice, but this is like, submission to the system of like celestial bureaucracy, where you fit in the stars. I think that is the level it is. But it can be really, you can either do it in such a way that is dark side and it will very quickly destroy you. Maybe you'll get some benefit from it. I think that that's real. I think that negative karma can exist from instantaneous, like, oh, I need this now. Or you can do something that is, maybe it's a little harder on yourself to do, to fit yourself into this place, but then it can, other people don't suffer as much in the process, and it can maybe do a lot for the system, and you don't even realize how big it is. That it's just that all of a sudden somebody doesn't die of thirst because of you, or something little, that all of a sudden it changes everything.
So coming back to kind of some level of in thinking beyond oneself and not being too tied up in narcissism, uh, one kind of to some degree may have to some degree or another be sacrificing their time, their energy, themselves, their reputation or whatever, but maybe in doing so they're able to benefit more people than had they not taken that action. Is that kind of what you're touching on, or am I missing the point?
No, I think that's right. I also think it's like for narcissists, the irony, or pious people similarly, or there's a lot of things. People that have a lot of shame, that focus on things like phobias, like on anything like that, like, but piety, especially in narcissism, you often won't reach the fulfillment through the thing that you want to be remembered for anyway.
Mhm. That's
So
interesting.
it ends up being that along the way, if you're constantly working on, it's like yoga, right? Like, it's, even though you're doing yoga because you want to lose weight and be pretty, it's yoga. It's a technology. Eventually it's going to affect you in a certain way. It doesn't matter if you're doing it for the wrong reason. It's yoga. So the same thing with doing the right thing. You might be doing it because you're a narcissist, but you're probably not going to become famous because you're a narcissist. But you might, because you're doing the right thing so often, accidentally do something along the way that really
Yeah.
helps a lot of people, especially if you're doing stuff a lot of the time,
Yeah.
but right things. And so that's a big, like, so Jordan Peterson, like, we'll say, don't do the wrong thing first. Get really good at not saying untruths before you focus on speaking truths, all that stuff. That's pretty fair. Like, clean your room, like, wash your genitals. Like, there's some pretty general, like, statements that philosophers are forced to tell people these days. They're not really aware of the simple truths. But yeah, I think that's all it is. It's just, we have to focus on being, you bake seeds, you make sure that certain things don't grow. And then around that, you can allow for the right things to grow. Because the other thing is okay, in synchronicity, there's a choice between chiseling and growing. So one thing is to break things down until you get to what you want. The other thing is to grow things until they become, and they're very different ways. And so sometimes, you'll destroy something because you'll say, I need it to become this prophecy of mine. And
Mhm.
that's very dangerous. And the other way is like, I'll just grow it and allow it to become what it does. That can also, it's usually better, but in my opinion, but sometimes that's dangerous too.
So trying to let things grow, but don't just let it get too out of control. At the same time, try to direct it in a positive direction.
Yeah,
And
and if you do it every day, then you have more say in its life. If
but
you
don't be
participate every
yeah,
day.
yeah. And maybe don't be over controlling because in doing so it might like kill the thing that gave it life in the first time, like
Yeah, I'd be
overwatering.
surprised. I'd say like things survive a lot more than you'd realize. So a lot of the time you think, wow, this moment could really quickly become like a raging auto accident, right? But you'd be surprised how many things live through a moment of craziness. You know, things that have been insane will happen and you can usually recover from it, or the moment will somehow survive. So I mean, it's a lot of time it's worth it. I feel like it's a big thing. So many people are saying, hey, you know, what if something bad happened? But most of the time, you know, almost everything I can ever think of is eventually conquered by life, by organic like solution. So I mean, it makes it through it. So there's that. I mean, but
So don't fear
um
too much, have hope because
yeah, exactly.
okay. The last two things that I want to touch on, if you're open to it, is
Totally. Yeah.
I feel like what little I know of you or how you come across or how my mind interprets you as an individual is like you seem like a very open-minded kind of person, like on the spectrum of open-mindedness to closed-mindedness. But maybe I'm misinterpreting you and your
I do
personality.
try. I worry that I'm not, you know how you worry? I worry too.
Yeah. And then on that, I don't know if you want to touch more on that. If not, but like I guess maybe what like do you feel like you've always been open-minded, or has there been certain things that have caused you to become more open-minded? And you're saying you're trying to be open-minded. So is that like something that's important to you? And then in addition to that, the other last question was what initially made you make the jump into podcasting? What was that? Yeah, those are the last two things I wanted to touch on.
Word.
Yeah.
So I guess like the first part of that, so in terms of open-mindedness is a really complicated idea to me. I think it comes down to like having it's like a tug of war, or an earth, or it's this polarity. So you've got an extreme. First you need to have your polarity have two extremes. You need to have like really negative and a really positive, but positive and negative don't have to mean that. It could be colors, but even still they have to be vibrantly different than each other, you know. And so you have to extend your heterodoxy. So the further apart and the more different that you can have, whatever, because then you're going to have some middle ground, you know. The middle ground will be more of your consensus because it's his side, her side, and the truth. But if you start out with, well, you know, like Bush is the best or Clinton is the best or something like that, and that's your frame of reference, as opposed to, you know, oh, you know, the universe is full of different ways that things happen, and I don't know, at least something broader than just like the United States in the 90s where I grew up, because that's a
Yeah.
big part of it also is. And my parents were already heterodox in that enough way because they didn't agree with each other politically growing up. One was into Republican, one was into Democrat, which to me is like football teams or something. It doesn't really extend beyond the bigger picture. So once you start saying, okay, well, this is what the world's like, and there's really more people that have this opinion, and isn't it interesting to listen to Russians? You know, they have this whole other side of the story. Or wow, the Filipinos, they sure did go through a lot in the early 2000s. What an interesting government. You know, if you start to talk to people, you know, that usually you're not going to hear from. Oh, you were human trafficked? Tell me the story, right? Like this is the kind of thing they didn't put on TV even a lot of the time, I felt like. So for me, that's another reason I led into podcasting, was just part of that struggle to get a broader and broader perspective from experience, because also expert means having experience. And we think of all these professionals as experts, but they're usually not. They're usually the opposite. People that have never ever experienced anything in their lives, compared to people that are like, yeah, I grew up in Burundi. And so the more you can talk to somebody and the more you can see stuff, the more podcasting is like the obvious answer. And it started out as just talking to people. Because in the early 90s, I would have, you know, literally conversations on Yahoo Radio chat with people in India. And that to me, I think was the most important thing. And if you can record it, then more people can get something out of that. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if everyone even loves that as much as me, but I think having a conversation with four people from 4 different countries with 4 different accents. There are 4 different propaganda news states running different perspectives on what
Yeah.
kind of world issue is happening is huge. It's a huge way that we can make sure that we have sort of a theos, the shared lens perspective. And I think that's a major reason for me. And I worry also, of course, because like the idea of open-mindedness sounds like, okay, if you're so open-minded, like this is like a
Yeah.
libertarian and American argument. Like, what happens if they allow for all kinds of horrible things? Well, it's not just that I'm open-minded. I really believe in this idea of a, Aristotelian philosophical forum, right? Which you can call whatever it is, or you can defend what the forum is in whichever way, whether it's authoritarian or if it's just so dang awesome that people want to be part of the forum. But the forum is this thing. It's like this idea that you can have an exchange of goods and services and ideas, right? And like ideas is such a huge one. And for free or for money or for each other or whatever. But if we can build that up, like that is all anyone ever, socialism, capitalism, anything, democracy, republic, they're talking about trying to figure out how to keep the forum going as best as possible. So I feel like it comes down to like, again, it's conversation.
Yeah. The importance of staying curious, the desire to understand, um, and to keep the conversation going through the generations, one day at a time, to try to come to different degrees of collective understanding. Um, Understanding is very important, and I think to
That
get
was
to
just
under yeah.
That's a more important. See, yeah, I didn't want you to forget. Like, or I didn't want to not have that be brought up because the other thing is that's the other reason why it's recorded. And being
Mhm.
able to reflect on something, you'll be able to come up with something by thinking about the conversation later in
Yeah.
self-reflection. And that's huge because that's where the answers come, hopefully.
And the next questions for the next conversations. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Andreas, for
Dude,
taking
thank
the
you. This is
time.
a lot of fun.
Thanks for sticking around and listening to the talk. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any interest in checking out any of Andreas's videos, any of his podcasts, or any of his memes, you can look below in the description box to find links to his Instagram, his Twitter account, and his YouTube channel, as well as some links to his other platforms.
Thanks for listening to the podcast, and have a nice day.